On the wall there, and on this side, are paintings by Ezra Wube, who is in Ethiopia. These paintings have to do with themes of migration. The migration is from multiple causes. Some of it is migration occasioned by the wars in the Horn of Africa, by the wars between, for example, Ethiopia and Eritrea, which continue even after the long effort to arrive at some kind of agreement on borders, which has not happened. The displacement of families and communities caused by famine, which has been a continuing problem in the Horn of Africa now for decades, and which has not been solved as a problem. So these works involve movement, as you see and follow the upper panel. And as you see in even greater detail in Exodus, the work over here, in which you see a whole community in movement. In Blue Battle, the painting here, Ezra has juxtaposed two figures, and he has used the two figures to represent traditional culture and changing culture, and used it to call into play examining how the world grows smaller, and how no matter where you are, there are cell phones and the internet. So the world gets smaller, and no identity, no matter how parochial it used to be, can survive as we go forward in such narrowness. So it calls for engagement with the world bigger and beyond. This piece, titled Open, is composed interestingly. It's a cutout figure of the face on a screen wire panel. The screen wire panel is itself hanging from a pair of thumbtacks, and the thumbtacks, in colors associated with liberation in East Africa, red, yellow, green, punched into the actual wall, and there's a small gun here, because the gun has become an icon of the failure of politics in the 20th century. One cannot help but cry in the heart at the omnipresence of guns in all of Africa, all of Latin and South America, and for that matter, all of Roxbury. Wherever there are people who don't make guns, there is an abundance of guns. So guns represent this perpetual threat to civil order and to the hope of actually making a world in which the principal organizing factor is not force, but consensus. Guns don't represent consensus, they represent force. So this is a piece that introduces this issue of gun and intimidation. And for that, it's a good transition to Ilona Anderson's piece here. This piece is titled Forced Removal, and it's about domestic violence in South Africa. Now, for Black Americans, we have a history that for centuries suffered from the oppression of racism in these United States. We emerged from the Civil War for another 80 years of oppression in slightly altered guises. And from all of that, we have communities which have embedded violence, violence that's turned back on itself. In fact, it's true that repressed societies everywhere develop these violent responses that are directed back towards yourself, preying on your own possibility. So that's at the core of this. Now, what is a bed? A bed is a place for being born. It's a place for dying. It's a place for the lovemaking that makes new life. So it's a place of regeneration. It's also a place of extended recuperation. So the bed is all of these things that stand at the center of family and community. So she has situated the bed in the middle. The rose blossoms that you see strewn over the bed call two things to mind. They call to mind the occasion of romance, which might be highlighted with the gift of roses. But they also call to mind funeral services where the roses are strewn. They could as easily call to mind the wedding bed where the roses also may be strewn. So that icon has these multiple purposes as well. But to make sure that the violent underpinning of it is not lost, there are guns and holsters intermixed with this. They are the odd objects here that represent the failure. So this piece with the pillow, with an actual blasted shot through it, with the very pretty item of what should be just a decorative detail, but in fact is a revolver embedded in flowers. She tries to make us inquire in a serious way into repressed violence in the domestic setting and how we come to grips with that. It has an enormous number of parallels to the Black American experience, even to the institution of apartheid, which so closely parallels our own Jim Crow history. So all of those are in Ilona's piece.